today we're going to be working on the cello part for Goin to Boston. This is an American folk song it's arranged by Carrie Lane Grussell, and it is from the Appalachian folk tradition. This is a really fun song. It's got a few challenges with rhythm, bowing, and whatnot. So we're going to go through each phrase of the piece at a slower tempo than the performance tempo. The tempo, as indicated in the score, is 104 beats per minute. And in smart music, they actually go just a tiny bit faster at 107 beats per minute. But we're going to take it at about 80 beats per minute today to just kind of walk through each section of the piece, and then I will play it for you at 107 beats per minute along with the backing track from smart music. So let's go ahead, and before we start this, let's talk about the important things to be noticing before we learn a piece of music. Number one, the key signature. We start out in the key of D major, and we are in D major for most of this song. That is 2 sharp, so F sharp and C sharp. So that means on our D string and A string, we are going to use finger pattern 1, 3, 4 for there. And if you have a C natural or F natural written in as an accidental, that would be a second finger. We do have a key change at measure 25. We go into the key of C major, which is no flats and sharp. So notice at measure 25, they've got 2 naturals as a key signature. That just cancels out the D major key signature that you had before. But notice that is only good for, it only lasts for 4 measures, and at 29 you are back in D major. On the G string, you would need to do an extension if you have a C sharp in the phrase, and on the C string, if you have an F sharp in the phrase, you would need to do an extension. But if those notes are not used, and I don't think they are used in this one, then you would not need to do that extension. It looks like this one is mostly on the D string and the A string. In fact, I just see a little bit of G string notes, measure 25, and that is the C major section, so just regular 4th finger, not the extended 4th finger there. Okay, let's go ahead, and I'm going to set the metronome at 80 beats per minute. I think that's a good starting point, and if you can learn each phrase of this piece up to 80 beats per minute, then you can gradually start moving the tempo faster and faster toward the target performance tempo, which, if you're playing with smart music, is going to be 107. So here we go. So this is our tempo for learning and for practice. I'm going to go ahead and start and just play the first line. Now for the rest of this, but we'll try and stick with that tempo. So on the first line, there's a couple of tricky things that you need to be thinking about. First of all, just making sure that you're really being clear with analyzing the entire rhythm and playing the correct number of bow strokes. You've got some 16th notes and 8th notes combined together in the same measure and sometimes in the same beat. And it's just really important that you're just making note of every single bow stroke, especially when you're repeating the same note on multiple notes, or the same note on multiple bows. If you miss a bow, then your bow's going to be moving in the wrong direction, and you don't want that. Also, at the end of measure 2, so if you do the bowing correctly, it's up bow at the beginning of measure 2, and then you retake. So anytime you have that comma over the end of a measure, it tells you to retake, bring the bow back to the frog, and you need to take a little bit of time off of the note before the comma. So again, so it's really effectively like you're just playing 8th note on beat 4 instead of a quarter note. Now continuing, we have pizzicato, and that's a pretty quick transition from the arco to the pizzicatos. So just make sure that you're holding your bow in a manner where you can pretty quickly switch to the pizzicato. And while you do the pizzicato, you always want to have your thumb on the side of the fingerboard to anchor it while you're plucking with either the middle finger or the first finger. And if you are holding your bow while you do the pizzicato, which you really do have to do in this piece, you don't have enough time to set it down, then you should just make sure that your third finger and your fourth finger are around the frog of the bow, and it's like you make a letter L with your index finger and your thumb, and then you can use either of these fingers to pluck, whichever feels better. So here's measure 5. And 4. And 4, and... Good, so those are marked staccato. You can keep the hair of the bow on the string, but you do want to be in the lower half of the bow and really feel like there's a little bit of a bouncing with the stick of the bow if you can. And then nice and solid at the end, using about half the bow for those quarter notes. Now we are playing the second part of the melody, which the first violins are playing the melody, you're playing harmony, and we're going to do it forte one time and then the same thing piano at 17. So here we go, 13. Good, so when you go from forte to piano, you might move a little closer to the middle of the bow, but probably not all the way to the upper half. Then continuing at measure 21, again, just make sure that as you're doing these 16th notes with the bow, that you're keeping the fingers and the wrist really nice and relaxed. You don't want to be doing that with your whole arm if you can avoid it. So maybe something to work on. Here we go, number 21. And 2, and 3, and 4. Then you have a measure of rest. 24, 1, and 2, and 3. Now we're in C major for the next one. So C natural, fourth finger on the G string, no extension. Here we go, 25. Now you're shifting, so we gotta go from second finger, because we are in C major there, it is second finger on the C, and then shift to first finger. That is technically second position. So your second finger will go on D. And you need to do that to get the range of what you play at 29. 29, you're going to play an E on the A string. You got to get into second position to reach that. Okay, so 29, this is probably the trickiest part for cello because you're doing a little bit of shifting. I don't think any of the other instruments have to shift in this song. But as a cellist, you do need to be maybe a little bit more used to shifting than some of your peers. So let's go ahead and start at measure 28, and I'm going to take the tempo even a little slower here so that we can break down the fingering and the shifting. Shift, and notice it was C natural, and then third finger would normally play C sharp, so that's first finger there, and then second finger and fourth. Back to first position now, second finger. So even though we have now, we're back in C major, so we've got we're back in D major, so we've got a C sharp and the key signature. They've given us a C natural in the first C of that measure, and that C natural is good for all the rest of the C's in that measure too. When you have an accidental, whether it's a sharp flat or a natural, it is good until the next bar line, so you just need to remember to keep playing that same note every time you get that letter name, unless they cancel it out with another accidental. So again, here is 30. Now back to second position, so second finger, and you can, as well we're practicing that, you can compare it with the open D. Make sure that's in tune. So back to first position. So again, starting at 28, let me go through this nice and slow. measure 32, is 2, 3, 4. And make sure that the second finger and the third finger are not touching. They're not right next to each other. Put a little bit of space in between them. Continuing, measure 33. We're out of the woods now and we're back into piano. Good. And when you get to that, when you're going into the pizzicato, you're probably going to need to make the note right before it really short if you're going for the pizzicato. So what you might consider doing in an orchestra is have one person on a standplay and then skip the first couple of pizzicato notes. So bum bum, maybe coming in on beat 2, and then the other person will play all the pizzicato notes. So if you can split within the section where half of you play all the pizzicato notes and leave out an arco note, and then the other half leave out some pizzicato notes but then play all the arco notes, and you'll have everything covered within your section. That's how it usually works in an orchestra when the transitions are quick like that. And if you are playing by yourself, if you can, just make that last pizzicato note really staccato, and then let that last arco note really staccato, and then see if you can get to the pizzicato in time. Continuing, I'm going to start with the pizzicato note measure 36, and because your last pizzicato note in that measure is an open D string, what I'll do is I'll do a left hand pizzicato. So that will be left hand, and then that'll give your right hand a little bit more time to get back onto the string. That's optional, but that's one way to do it, especially if it's an open string, to make the transition a little smoother. So here we go. Retake. 1 and 2 and. Good. So that is the whole song. I would suggest that you break it down into chunks to practice it. And the phrases in this song are 4 measures long for the most part. So if you kind of take each 4 measure section and work on each one, then you can work on stringing them together into 8 measure sections and maybe 16 measures. And then once you have it all down, just really work on getting the tempo a little faster. And the parts that are harder are going to take a little bit more time to work on the tempo. So those are ones that you might want to repeat at a gradually faster tempo without playing through the whole thing. Let's go ahead and try it with smart music now. I'm going to go ahead and keep smart music at the default tempo. You've probably noticed, or you may have noticed, that when you're in smart music, you can change the tempo. However, it does also change the sound quality of the background part of the backing track. So when you move the tempo up or down, you'll get sort of a garbled sound. It's still the right pitch, but it may be a little bit distracting. So I would recommend that you use smart music to listen to the song at full tempo. Practice it at whatever tempo you need to, maybe with a metronome as your guide, and then when you're ready to play maybe even sections of it up to tempo, then you can play it with smart music. fun too. So I hope that you enjoy practicing Going to Boston. It's a really fun piece of music. It's kind of an Appalachian fiddle style, which is an important style of American folk music that features a lot of strings. So good luck and happy practicing.